Welcome, dear listener. I'm glad you've chosen to spend this quiet time with me tonight. Perhaps you are resting, perhaps you are studying, or perhaps you simply need a story to drift away with. Whatever the reason, thank you for being here. Tonight, we'll wander through one of the most striking encounters in history, the meeting between the Mexico world and the Spanish conquistadors. This story is often told with the thunder of battles and the clang of steel, but here we'll move differently. Imagine walking slowly along the canals of Tenochtitlan at dawn, the water reflecting the first light, the sound of paddles against the surface, the hum of voices as the great marketplace comes alive. Vendors calling out their goods, the smell of fresh tortillas baking over open fires, the colors of feathers and fabrics glinting in the morning sun. The city was immense, orderly, and powerful, a jewel upon the lake, sustained by warriors, merchants, priests, and families going about their daily lives. Every corner of Tenochtitlan seemed to pulse with life, from the plazas where merchants traded to the temples rising above the city, echoing with the sounds of ritual and music. To the strangers arriving from across the ocean, it must have seemed like stepping into a world vast and extraordinary, full of challenge and full of opportunity for conquest. The Spanish, confident in their armor and weapons, saw themselves as masters of fate, bringing order and religion to lands they believed ripe for the taking. But the Mexico were not easily intimidated. They had trained their entire lives in the arts of war, knew the rhythms of their city and its defenses, and carried in their minds the strategies and stories of generations of warriors. And yet, what truly decided the fate of this world was invisible. The Spanish arrived as conquerors, armed and determined, while the Mexicans stood on their own territory, seasoned and formidable warriors. On the battlefield, they should have had the advantage. But the real force that shaped the outcome did not wield a sword or a cannon. Disease, smallpox, measles, and other invisible invaders swept through the city like a wildfire, moving faster than any army could march, striking homes, weakening defenders, and unsettling the rhythm of daily life. In the end, according to world history, the Spanish were the conquerors, but in reality, the crown went to microbes. So take a slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and let this story carry you. Listen to the sounds of the city that once was, the birds rising with the sun, the splash of canoes, the laughter of children chasing one another across the plazas. Let your mind wander among the temples, the marketplaces, the canals that reflected the sky, and the lives of people who did not yet know that history was about to shift in ways they could not imagine. If you're enjoying this journey, feel free to share it with friends, and leave a comment about what part of the story caught your imagination or surprised you the most. Maybe a detail, a thought, or a question, anything that made you pause or smile. Every time someone shares their reflections, the story keeps living and connecting us, just as stories have done for centuries. So take a moment, write a note, and let this journey continue together, one listener at a time. And now, let us step fully into the Valley of Mexico, before the strangers arrived, when Tenochtitlan still shone like a jewel upon the water, alive with colors, sounds, and the rhythm of everyday life, ready to greet a morning that history would never forget. Tenochtitlan, rising at the very heart of Lake Texcoco, was more than a city. It was an apparition that seemed to defy logic and geography. Imagine approaching across the water for the first time, whether as a visitor from a nearby Tlatelolco or, later, as a foreigner from across the sea, and seeing an entire metropolis seemingly anchored in the middle of the lake, its temples and palaces gleaming as though floating upon the water's surface. The sunlight refracted in the ripples around its causeways, giving the impression that the city itself shimmered with life. From a distance, the skyline appeared crowned by pyramidal temples painted in vivid reds, whites, and blues, each one standing as both a marker of divine devotion and of imperial power. Unlike the smoke-blackened towns of Europe, with their cramped alleys and walls stained by centuries of coal fires. This city unfolded in ordered brilliance, open to the sky and woven with canals. To describe Tenochtitlan was to describe something that lay beyond the familiar vocabulary of outsiders. It was less a city and more a vision, half architecture, half dream. At dawn, Tenochtitlan awakened with a rhythm that was as natural as the sunrise, yet as carefully orchestrated as a symphony. The lake itself mirrored the first light of the day, turning shades of pink and gold, while the air carried the faint chill of the highland plateau. Canoes glided silently through the mist, their paddles slicing the water in steady cadence. Birds hidden among the reeds called out with bright, piercing cries, weaving their voices into the quiet murmur of human activity beginning to stir. Families emerged from their homes, sweeping the streets, preparing meals, or gathering bundles of goods to take to market. Across the neighborhoods, the smells of ground maize, wood smoke, and fresh herbs began to mingle. The city was awake, not in chaos, but in a deeply patterned harmony. It was an organism breathing in unison, each part feeding into the whole, each day beginning as a rehearsal of order and vitality. This order extended into every level of society. The city was divided into calpuli, local districts that formed the backbone of social and political life. Each calpule had its own temples, its own communal lands, and its own responsibilities to the empire. They were miniature societies within the greater whole, bound together by kinship and labor. Within a calpuli, one might hear the crack of maize being ground on a metate, the whistle of children at play, the steady rhythms of weavers at their looms. But one would also see the mechanisms of discipline, elders overseeing the young, officials ensuring tribute was collected, priests calling people to ceremony. It was a world in which individuality was never detached from community. Every action, whether farming, crafting, or trading, was part of a larger pattern of survival and order. The city itself was a mosaic, thousands of lives woven into one dazzling whole. And yet, the most dazzling fragment of this mosaic was perhaps the marketplace of Tlatelolco. To step into it was to step into a spectacle of abundance and regulation. Contemporary accounts, both indigenous and European, described gatherings so large they defied comprehension. Tens of thousands of people crowding the wide expanse, moving like a living tide among stalls and rows of goods. There were pyramids of maize stacked higher than a man's chest, shimmering piles of cacao beans, bundles of tobacco, gourds filled with honey, and baskets of chilies that released sharp scents into the air. Traders displayed obsidian knives that flashed with a deadly gleam, feather capes that shifted in the light like liquid fire, and finely painted ceramics that seemed almost too delicate for daily use. To walk the market was not merely to shop. It was to wander through a theater of civilization, to witness the empire's wealth condensed into a single square. The sounds of Tlatelolco built into a roar that could be heard from the surrounding streets. Vendors called out their prices, voices rising and overlapping until they became part of the market's pulse. Buyers bargained, sometimes laughing, sometimes arguing, always engaged in the ritual of exchange. The clatter of clay jars being set down, the dull thud of woven mats unrolled for display, the distant cry of animals, turkeys, dogs, or even monkeys brought from distant lands, filled the air. Yet, despite the chaos of thousands, the market was not left to disorder. Officials appointed by the city patrolled its avenues, watching carefully for theft or deceit. Judges sat ready to settle disputes on the spot, ensuring justice was visible and swift. This, too, was part of the spectacle. The market was proof that abundance could coexist with discipline, that prosperity did not descend into anarchy, but was elevated into ritualized order. And above all this rose the temples, towering reminders that life in Tenochtitlan was never detached from the divine. The Templo Mayor, dominating the city's ceremonial center, stood as a physical embodiment of duality. One shrine dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, the other to Tlatelolco, the god of rain and fertility. Painted stairways led upward to the shrines, where priests conducted rituals visible to thousands gathered below. The temple was a constant reminder that human life unfolded under divine expectation, that every victory and every harvest was bound to the will of the gods. It was not only a structure of stone. It was an axis where heaven and earth were believed to meet. Festivals and rituals transformed the city into something even greater than itself. Entire neighborhoods mobilized, with dancers donning costumes made from feathers, jade, and polished shells, their movements weaving sacred patterns across the plazas. The deep beat of drums echoed through the avenues, mingled with the piercing notes of flutes and conch shells. Clouds of copal incense billowed upward, veiling the temples in a haze of fragrance that was said to carry prayers to the heavens. Sacrifices, whether offerings of flowers, animals, or humans, were acts of reciprocity, gifts given back to sustain the cosmic order. To the Mexica, the universe itself was precarious, balanced on the fulfillment of sacred duties. Life was abundant, yes, but it was also a constant negotiation with forces larger than themselves. Agriculture provided the foundation for this abundance, and its ingenuity cannot be overstated. The Chinampa's rectangular plots, built on the lake's shallow waters, were marvels of engineering. Farmers constructed them by weaving reeds into rafts, layering them with soil and organic matter, and anchoring them with willow trees, whose roots stabilized the islands. Over time, these floating gardens became more fertile than the land itself, producing several harvests a year. Maize, beans, squash, amaranth, and flowers flourished here, transforming what might have been a hostile environment into a breadbasket. From above, the Chinampas appeared as a patchwork quilt of green, interlaced with blue canals, a man-made paradise that proved the Mexica were not merely warriors, but masters of ecological design. And with this abundance came a culture of food that was both practical and celebratory. In every household, women prepared tortillas fresh each morning, flattening maize dough with skilled hands before laying it on hot stones. Beans were boiled with herbs, chilies were roasted and ground into salsas that ranged from smoky to searing, and tamales were wrapped in maize husks for festivals or journeys. Occasionally, turkey, rabbit, or fish added variety to the meal, while cacao prepared as a spiced, bitter drink was reserved for nobles and warriors. Food was not just sustenance. It was identity, memory, and ritual. The preparation of maize itself, through the process of nixtamalization, revealed a knowledge so advanced that it unlocked nutrients otherwise inaccessible, allowing millions to thrive. The act of eating was, in many ways, an act of cultural survival. Education, too, was woven into the very fabric of daily life in Tenochtitlan, ensuring that every child, regardless of gender or social status, was drawn into the empire's rhythms. Boys were expected to enter formal schools, either the Tlatelolco, where they were trained for military service and civic responsibilities, or the more prestigious Causeways, reserved for the sons of nobility, where they studied history, religion, astronomy, and governance. Girls, often taught within the home or community, learned skills essential to maintaining households and participating in the economic and ritual life of the city. Weaving, cooking, healing, and ceremonial duties. Discipline was strict, harsh punishments, from pricked skin with maguey thorns to public reprimands, reinforced the seriousness of education. Yet it was also aspirational. Through learning, one could step into the roles that kept society functioning, from warrior to priest to artisan. Knowledge here was not a luxury. It was the mortar that held the empire's future together. Artisans and craftspeople gave physical form to this culture's brilliance. The feather workers, known as amanteca, were perhaps the most celebrated, transforming the delicate plumes of tropical birds into cloaks, headdresses, and shields that shimmered like living rainbows. Jewelers shaped turquoise, jade, and obsidian into objects that carried both beauty and sacred power, while potters painted vessels with motifs that told stories of gods and heroes. Stone carvers shaped statues that were at once terrifying and awe-inspiring, capturing the raw force of deities whose favor or wrath determined the fate of entire communities. These artisans were not mere laborers. They were guardians of memory and transmitters of meaning. In every feather cape, every carved idol, every painted codex, they condensed centuries of knowledge, devotion, and identity. To behold their work was to be reminded that the Mexica were not only warriors, but also artists of staggering sophistication. Beyond art and craft, the social hierarchy structured life into clear but permeable layers. At the top stood the Tlatelolco, the speaker, whose word carried the weight of divine sanction. Below him stretched an intricate web of nobles, priests, warriors, artisans, and farmers, each with obligations and privileges balanced against one another. Nobles managed estates and directed tribute. Priests maintained the cosmos through ritual. Warriors earned prestige, and sometimes even ascension through bravery in battle. Commoners, though bound by heavier labor, were not powerless. They could achieve honor through service, skill, or military success. Even slaves, often war captives or debtors, were not condemned to permanent bondage. They could buy their freedom or earn it through loyal service. This layered society was not static but dynamic, always shifting as ambition, fate, and devotion carved new pathways upward or downward. Music and poetry, too, filled the air of the city, not as luxuries, but as essential expressions of life. Court poets composed verses that blended philosophy with beauty, meditating on the fragility of existence, the fleeting nature of joy, and the inevitability of death. Their words, often sung to the accompaniment of drums and flutes, were performed in palaces and public squares alike, weaving communal reflection into the fabric of daily life. Warriors sang before battle, mothers sang to soothe their children, and rituals echoed with chants that called upon divine powers. Sound was not simply entertainment, it was a medium of memory, identity, and transcendence. In every note, the people affirmed their place in a cosmos that was, to them, both perilous and magnificent. The canals of Tenochtitlan, laced through its districts, were more than utilitarian. They were arteries of life, carrying canoes heavy with produce, firewood, or passengers across the city. The waterways connected markets, neighborhoods, and ceremonial centers, ensuring constant movement and exchange. For a visitor, the sight of boats gliding past each other, the water catching the colors of the sky, and the sounds of vendors calling across the docks, must have given the city an otherworldly quality, a metropolis floating on water. These canals were not just infrastructure. They were part of the city's identity, a reminder that the Mexica had mastered both land and water, shaping nature itself into harmony with their needs. At the heart of this world stood the great ceremonial precinct, where pyramids and temples rose like mountains of stone. The Templo Mayor dominated, its twin shrines honoring Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlatelolco, god of rain and fertility. Ascending its steps was not only a physical climb, but also a symbolic journey, drawing worshippers closer to the realm of the gods. Rituals performed here were both awe-inspiring and terrifying, offerings of flowers and incense, alongside sacrifices meant to sustain the very fabric of the universe. To the Mexica, these acts were not cruelty, they were necessity. Without them, the sun might falter, the rains might withhold, and the world itself could collapse. The temple square was thus both a political and cosmic center, where the empire reaffirmed its power not only over people, but over existence itself. The rhythms of the marketplace offered a different kind of vitality. The great market at Tlatelolco, said to host tens of thousands of traders, was a world in itself. Here one could find everything from obsidian blades to cacao beans, from cotton textiles to exotic animals brought from distant provinces. Merchants, or pachteca, played a vital role as both economic lifeblood and cultural messengers, traveling far beyond the valley to bring back goods and intelligence. Spanish chroniclers, upon entering these markets, were stunned at their order, scale, and abundance, astonished that a so-called savage people had built a system more organized and bustling than many cities in Europe. In the hum of the marketplace, you could hear the pulse of the empire. Food was another testament to the Mexicas' ingenuity and deep relationship with their environment. Maize, beans, and squash formed the triad of sustenance, complemented by amaranth, chili peppers, tomatoes, and cacao. From these ingredients came dishes that sustained both body and spirit: tamales wrapped in steaming husks, tortillas fresh from the griddle, chocolate drinks reserved for the elite. The diet was not only nutritious, but sophisticated, showing a balance of flavors and techniques that astounded outsiders. Eating in this world was never merely consumption. It was ritual, social bond, and an affirmation of the gifts the gods had bestowed upon humanity. Daily life unfolded in houses built of stone and adobe, grouped around courtyards where families gathered, worked, and rested. Children played with small clay figurines, families tended to their hearths, and elders recounted histories that bound each generation to the next. Nights were lit by torches and stars, mornings greeted by the cries of birds and the first sounds of the marketplace awakening. Even amid the demands of empire tributes, warfare, ceremony, there was intimacy, routine, and warmth. It is easy, when hearing the grand stories of conquests and rituals, to forget that this was also a world of laughter, of children's voices, of meals shared at dusk. And so, as we look at this city before the Spaniards set foot upon its causeways, we see not a backdrop awaiting conquest, but a thriving civilization, full of depth and brilliance. Its people had shaped the land, organized themselves into complex hierarchies, crafted beauty from stone and feather, sung songs to gods and to each other, and built one of the largest cities of its time. To understand what was lost is to understand how much had been achieved. And to stand at the threshold of this encounter, we must carry with us the weight of that greatness, so that when the story shifts, when foreign sails appear on the horizon, we remember what was already here. The wind that came from the east did not arrive with noise or fury, but with a quiet shift in the air, a subtle alteration that settled into the skin before the mind could name it. Along the shores of the Gulf, where the waves broke softly against the dark sand, and fishermen pushed their canoes into the salt water at dawn, something felt different in the morning light. The horizon, usually clear and familiar, now held a shape that did not belong, a cluster of forms rising from the sea like floating houses, their tall masts cutting into the sky, their sails wide and stiff, catching a wind that seemed to move only for them. The men paused, their hands resting on the gunwales, their eyes narrowing against the glare. They had seen storms, they had seen distant ships of their own people, but nothing like this. No vessel so large, so rigid, so clearly guided by a force they could not understand. It did not drift, it advanced. It did not respond to the tides in the way living things did. And when it vanished into the haze, it left behind not just a memory, but a silence heavier than before. The fishermen spoke of it quietly that evening, not with fear, but with a kind of awe, as if they had glimpsed something from a dream the world had forgotten. They described the pale faces of the men aboard, their bodies covered in metal that clinked when they moved, their animals with hooves like stone and eyes that burned like fire. Word traveled fast, not on paper or in books, but through the steady rhythm of runners' feet across the land, through traders whispering in market corners, through elders repeating the story to their grandchildren as if it were already a legend. And with each telling, the image grew clearer, not because more was known, but because the unknown had begun to take shape in the collective imagination, like a face forming in smoke. When the message reached the heart of the empire, it was not met with panic, but with a deep and deliberate stillness. In the high chambers of the palace in Tenochtitlan, where the air was thick with the scent of copal, and the walls were painted with the stories of gods and ancestors, the Tlatoani listened without speaking. His hands rested on the arms of his stone seat, carved in the shape of a jaguar's paws, his face unreadable. Before him, the messenger knelt, breathless from days of running, his clothes stained with dust and sweat, his voice low but steady as he repeated what he had seen: the floating houses, the men with skin like moonlight, the beasts that roared like thunder. The room was silent. No one interrupted. No one questioned. The weight of the words settled like ash after a fire. Nearby, the priests exchanged glances, not of fear, but of recognition, for they had studied the codices. They had memorized the prophecies. They knew the old stories of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who had once walked among men before vanishing to the east, promising to return in a time of great change. Was this his coming? Or was it something else, something not foretold, something without a name? The elders debated in hushed tones, not about whether to act, but about how to interpret what had been seen. Dreams were shared that night, of eclipses, of rivers flowing backward, of temples cracking open without cause. The augurs studied the flight of birds, the patterns of smoke, the stillness of water. They did not seek answers, but signs, subtle confirmations that the world was still speaking, still guiding them, even as the ground beneath their feet began to shift in ways they could not yet feel. In the temples, the silence was not empty, but full, a silence that held breath, that listened. The priests moved slowly, deliberately, as if any sudden motion might disturb the balance of things. They lit incense in small clay bowls, watching the smoke curl upward in thin spirals, twisting like serpents before dissolving into the air. Each movement was a prayer, each breath a ritual. They did not rush to conclusions, for they knew that certainty was often the first mistake. Instead, they waited. They observed. They allowed the uncertainty to exist, to breathe, to reveal itself in time. For days, the city carried on as usual. The markets hummed. The farmers tended their chinampas. The children played in the courtyards. But beneath the surface, a current ran, quiet but insistent. People looked toward the east when they thought no one was watching. Mothers held their children a little closer. Artisans painted new symbols into their work. A distant ship, a strange animal, a man with pale skin and a helmet of metal. These were not acts of fear, but of memory, an attempt to record what was happening before it became myth. In the schools, the elders told stories not found in the codices, stories of distant lands across the sea, of people who sailed without stars, of gods who spoke in languages no one could understand. The students listened, their eyes wide, not knowing if they were hearing history or prophecy. And in the homes, families gathered at night and spoke in low voices, not of war or conquest, but of change, the kind that does not come with noise, but with a slow turning of the world, like the earth tilting toward a new season. Meanwhile, in the villages along the coast, life continued, but with a new awareness. The fishermen still went out at dawn, but now they scanned the horizon with more than just their eyes, with their instincts, their memories, their inherited sense of what belonged and what did not. They taught their children to watch the sea, not just for fish, but for signs. They spoke of the strangers not as monsters, but as men. Strange, yes, but men all the same. And men could be understood. Men could be spoken to. Men could be traded with, or fought, or welcomed. The uncertainty was not in their existence, but in their intent. Were they seeking land, tribute, souls? Or were they, like so many before them, simply lost, searching for a place to rest? The elders reminded the young that the world was vast, that not everything could be known, that even the Mexica had once been wanderers, guided by visions and omens, until they found the eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent, the sign that this lake, this island, this city was theirs. Perhaps these newcomers were following their own omen, their own dream. And if so, then the encounter was not just a collision of worlds, but a meeting of destinies, each shaped by stories older than memory. The wind still blew from the east, carrying salt and moisture, but now it also carried questions, soft, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. And yet, in the midst of all this quiet anticipation, life did not stop. The sun still rose over the lake, painting the water in gold and rose. The canoes still glided across the canals, their paddles slicing the surface with gentle precision. The women still ground maize on stone, their hands moving in rhythms passed down through generations. The children still laughed, chasing each other through the narrow paths between houses. The temples still echoed with the low beat of drums, the high cry of flutes, the murmur of prayers rising into the sky. The city breathed, it lived, it dreamed. And though the horizon held something unknown, though the runners still came with news, though the priests still burned copal and watched the smoke, the world continued, not because it was unaware, but because it was alive. Because even in the face of change, even when the future trembled in the balance, the present remained. The tortillas still warmed on the comals. The flowers still bloomed on the chinampas. The stars still turned above the pyramids. And the heart, no matter how uncertain, still beat in rhythm with the earth. In the highlands, far from the coast, the news arrived differently. Not with images of floating houses, but with silence. The Totonaca, who lived under the weight of tribute and sacrifice, heard the rumors and did not tremble. They listened, and then they looked at each other with eyes that held no fear, only calculation. They had long suffered under the Aztec Empire, sending their sons as captives, their daughters as brides, their harvests as offerings. They knew the rhythm of submission, and now they sensed a crack in the foundation. If strangers had arrived from the sea, if they carried weapons that thundered and moved on beasts with fire in their eyes, perhaps they were not messengers of the gods. Perhaps they were tools. Tools that could be used. The elders gathered in the shade of a ceiba tree, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching toward the sky. They did not speak of conquest. They spoke of survival, of opportunity, of a future where their children would not have to walk to Tenochtitlan in chains. They did not know who these men were, but they knew what they represented, a chance. And so, when the runners came, they did not send them back with warnings. They sent them forward with maps, with food, with quiet promises of alliance, not out of loyalty to the strangers, but out of loyalty to themselves. In Tlaxcala, the reaction was sharper, more urgent. The Tlaxcaltecas had resisted the Mexica for generations. They had never bowed. They had fought every invasion, every demand, every attempt to absorb them. Their city was not rich in gold, but in pride. And when they heard of the men from the sea, they did not speak of omens or gods. They spoke of war, of strategy, of timing. Their leaders met in the council house, where the walls were painted with scenes of battle and sacrifice. They studied the descriptions: metal that covered the body, weapons that exploded like lightning, horses that moved faster than any runner. They did not believe these men were divine. They believed they were dangerous. And danger, in the right hands, could be turned into power. They debated for days, not about whether to meet the strangers, but how. As enemies? As equals? As allies? In the end, they chose alliance, not out of friendship, but because they saw a greater enemy. The Mexica had surrounded them, isolated them, starved them. Now, a new force had appeared, one that might break the siege. They prepared gifts, not gold, but information. They would show the strangers the roads, the rivers, the weaknesses. They would feed them, house them, fight beside them. Not for glory, for freedom. And in the quiet corners of the city, among the weavers and potters, the farmers and midwives, the rumors took on a different shape. They were not told in council chambers or temples, but in whispers over hearths, in lullabies sung to children, in the quiet prayers offered at dawn. A woman grinding maize might say to her daughter, "They say the sky is opened, and men have come from beyond the water." The child would ask, "Are they good men?" And the mother would pause, her hands still on the stone, and say, "I do not know." But the world does not change without reason. These were not stories of conquest or salvation, but of transformation, of cycles, of endings and beginnings. The old ones remembered how their grandparents had spoken of droughts, of famines, of gods who turned away. They knew that the earth had trembled before, and each time life had found a way to continue, not the same, but still it continued. And so, even as the priests debated and the warriors planned, the people waited, not with fear, but with the quiet patience of those who have learned to live through change. Melinson, still young, still unnamed in the great stories yet to be written, listened to all in it. She did not stand in the palace, nor in the council, nor in the temple. She stood in the margins, where languages met and meanings slipped. She had been given many names, many roles: daughter, slave, interpreter, bridge. She had learned Nahuatl from her mother, Maya from her captors, and now, slowly, a new tongue from the men who had arrived with fire and steel. She did not yet know the weight of her voice, but she felt it growing. She heard the way words were twisted, the way a single phrase could be spoken with kindness and understood as threat. She saw how translation was not just about language, but about power. And so she listened carefully. She remembered every word. She weighed every silence. Because she knew, even then, that when two worlds meet, it is not the loudest voice that shapes the future, but the one that speaks in between. Geronimo de Aguilar, stranded for years among the Maya, also felt the shift. He had survived shipwreck, captivity, hunger, and solitude. He had learned to speak a language not his own, to eat food that once turned his stomach, to live by rhythms that were not his. He had become, in many ways, someone else. And now, when the ships returned, when the men in armor called his name, he did not rush to them with joy. He hesitated. He looked at the people who had kept him alive, who had given him shelter, who had treated him as one of their own. And he wondered, who was he now? A Spaniard? A castaway? A traitor? When he began to translate, his voice was quiet, measured. He did not exaggerate. He did not lie. But he also did not reveal everything. He knew that words could open doors or burn bridges. And so he chose each one carefully, not for loyalty to a flag, but for survival in a world that had already broken once. In the schools of Tenochtitlan, the children still recited the old stories. They spoke of Huitzilopochtli, born fully armed from his mother's womb, of how he had slain his sister and cast her into the sky to become the moon. They chanted the verses of Nezahualcóyotl, the poet king who had questioned the nature of the divine. But now their teachers added a new line, and there were signs from the east. No explanation, no fear. Just a fact, spoken softly, like a seed planted in soil. The children repeated it, not knowing why, but feeling its weight. They did not ask if the signs were good or bad. They only knew they were real. And in that knowing, the future began to take shape. The runners kept coming. Day after day, night after night, their feet marked the paths between coast and city. They brought not just news, but objects, a piece of glass that reflected the world in strange ways, a metal coin with a face they did not recognize, a scrap of paper covered in marks like ants. These were passed from hand to hand, studied, touched, smelled, held up to the light. No one could read them, but everyone felt their foreignness. They were not tools. They were not weapons. They were messages. And messages, even when silent, carry meaning. The priests burned more copal. They fasted. They dreamed. They saw visions of water turning red, of temples sinking into the lake, of a great bird flying west with a man on its back. They did not share all they saw. Some truths were too heavy for the people. Some fears, if spoken, could become real. And so they kept their silence, their prayers, their rituals. They continued to offer what they had, flowers, incense, blood, hoping it would be enough to keep the balance. The market at Tlatelolco did not slow. The traders still shouted, the buyers still bargained, the scales still measured cacao and cloth. But now, between the transactions, there were pauses. A vendor would stop mid-sentence, look toward the east, and continue as if nothing had happened. A woman buying chilies would ask, "Have you heard anything from the coast?" And the answer, always the same, only rumors, only wind. And still, the lake reflected the sky. The canoes still glided, the children still played, the sun still rose. The world, vast and slow, continued its turning, indifferent to the tremors at its edges. The fish still swam beneath the surface. The reeds still swayed in the breeze. The stars still lit the night. And the air, though heavy with anticipation, still carried the scent of maize, of water, of life. And yet the world kept moving in silence. The damp sand yields beneath the weight of heavy boots as the first men step from the wooden hulls onto the shore, their bodies unsteady after months of rolling seas, their eyes blinking against the bright morning light that spills across the coast like liquid gold. The ships, once towering presences on the horizon, now rest half-submerged in the shallows, their sails folded and lashed, their masts silent against the sky. Around them, the world feels vast and still, untouched by the noise of metal and command, filled instead with the soft lap of waves, the distant cry of seabirds, and the rustle of palm fronds in the warm coastal wind. The air is thick with salt and the scent of wet earth, carrying with it the faint, green smell of jungle just beyond the tree line. The men do not cheer. They do not raise their swords in triumph. They simply stand, breathing deeply, feeling the solidity of the land beneath their feet, as if confirming that they have truly arrived at the edge of a world they have only dreamed of. Their armor clinks with every small movement, a sound that feels too sharp, too foreign in this soft, breathing landscape where even the silence has a rhythm of its own. Among them, two figures move with a different kind of awareness, not as conquerors, but as bridges. Geronimo Aguilar walks slowly, his eyes scanning the faces of the people who watch from a distance, their postures calm, their expressions unreadable. He has lived among them before, not as a guest, but as a prisoner, a castaway from a shipwreck that left him stranded for years, learning their language, their customs, their ways of silence and meaning. He knows that words are not just sounds, but vessels. Some carry truth, others deception, and many carry both at once. When he speaks now, it is not with the confidence of a soldier, but with the caution of a man who has learned that survival depends on understanding what is left unsaid. Beside him, Melinson walks with quiet grace, her presence unassuming but essential. She does not wear armor, she does not carry a weapon, yet her voice will shape the path ahead more than any sword. Born into nobility, sold into slavery, passed from one hand to another, she has learned to navigate worlds without belonging to any. She hears Nahuatl in her blood, Maya in her memory, and now this new, guttural tongue of the strangers, which she is beginning to shape with precision. She listens to every word, every pause, every shift in tone, not just for meaning, but for intention. She knows that a single phrase, spoken too quickly or too softly, can open a door to alliance or slam it shut forever. The first exchanges happen slowly, like two animals circling each other in the wild, each waiting for the other to make a move. The Spaniards offer gifts not gold, not weapons, but glass beads that catch the light like drops of water. Small mirrors that show faces in ways no still lake ever could. Bells that chime with a sound no one has ever heard. The local people accept them with quiet curiosity, turning the objects in their hands, passing them from one to another, studying them not as treasures, but as mysteries. They do not bow. They do not tremble. They simply observe. When they speak, their voices are calm, their gestures measured. They ask questions not of conquest, but of origin. Where do you come from? Why have you come? What do you seek? The answers are translated, reshaped, carried across the gap between understanding and assumption. The Spaniards say they come in peace, that they serve a great king, that they bring a new god. The others listen, nod, and do not reply immediately. They know that words can be weapons, that promises can be broken, that men who speak of peace often carry war in their hearts, and so they wait, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. As days pass, the beach becomes a space of cautious contact, a threshold where two rhythms begin to overlap. The Spaniards build shelters from the wood of their ships, their movements sharp and angular, their voices often loud, their laughter sudden and startling. The local people watch from a distance, then closer, then among them. Children approach first, drawn by the strange animals, the dogs with their barking voices, the horses that stand so tall and still. They reach out to touch the smooth hide, to feel the warmth of the breath, to hear the soft snort that seems almost like speech. The men on horseback sit motionless, letting the moment unfold, aware that this simple act of child touching a horse is already rewriting the world. Meanwhile, the women observe the way the newcomers eat, the way they cook, the way they wash. They notice the metal pots, the hard bread, the liquid they drink that makes their eyes shine. Nothing is dismissed, nothing is imitated yet, but everything is remembered, stored in the quiet archive of collective memory, where even the smallest detail can one day become a sign. The decision to burn the ships is not made in a single moment, but in a series of quiet conversations under the stars. The men gather, not in triumph, but in resolve. They know what it means. To destroy the means of return is to bind themselves to this land, to say that there is no going back, that their fate is now sealed to the soil beneath their feet. The flames rise slowly at first, fed by dry wood and pitch, then grow into a roaring column that lights the night sky. The sound is not celebratory, but solemn, like a funeral pyre for the lives they have left behind. Some men watch in silence, their faces unreadable. Others turn away. A few whisper prayers. The act is not just strategic, it is symbolic, a declaration that they are no longer visitors, but settlers, conquerors, or perhaps exiles. From this moment on, every step they take is forward. There is no retreat. There is only the path ahead, winding into the unknown, and the weight of knowing that they have chosen this, not for glory, but for necessity. They begin to move inland, following trails that have been walked for generations, worn into the earth by feet, by trade, by ritual. The air changes as they climb, cooler, thinner, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. The landscape shifts from coast to forest, from sand to stone. Their bodies ache from the unfamiliar terrain, from the weight of their armor, from the constant awareness that they are being watched, not just by the people who walk beside them as guides, but by the land itself. Every rustle in the underbrush, every bird that takes flight, every shadow between the trees feels like a message. They do not know the language of this world, but they feel its presence, its resistance, its patience. And still they press on, driven by belief, by ambition, by the unshakable conviction that they are meant to be here, that this land, with all its silence and mystery, is theirs to claim. Melinson walks among them, her eyes always moving, her mind always listening. She translates not just words, but silences, gestures, the space between what is said and what is meant. When a chief bows his head, she knows it is not submission, but respect. When a warrior grips his spear, She knows it is not threat, but readiness. When a woman turns away, she knows it is not fear, but judgment. Her voice becomes the bridge, but it is a bridge with no railing. She stands in the middle, belonging to neither side, responsible to both. She does not speak for herself, not yet. She speaks for others, shaping their thoughts into a language that can be understood. But in doing so, she also shapes what is understood. A word softened here, a phrase emphasized there. These small acts ripple outward, unseen, but real. She does not know if she is helping or betraying, only that she is surviving, and that survival has become a kind of power. The first alliance is not sealed with a treaty, but with a meal. They sit together on the ground, sharing food from the same vessels: maize, beans, roasted turkey, cactus fruit. The Spaniards eat cautiously, not knowing what is safe, what is sacred. The others watch, not to mock, but to see if they will show respect. One man refuses the offering, turns his head. The moment is noted, remembered. Another accepts it with both hands, bows slightly. That gesture is remembered too. There is no grand ceremony, no exchange of flags or oaths, only the quiet understanding that for now they will walk the same path. The reasons are not spoken aloud, but felt. The people of this land have long lived under the weight of Tenochtitlan, paying tribute, sending captives, bowing to a power they did not choose. The strangers bring something new, not just weapons, but possibility. And so they offer guidance, supplies, warriors. Not out of love, but out of hope. Hope that this strange force from the sea might break the chains that have bound them for generations. As they travel, the world continues around them. In the villages they pass, life does not stop. Women grind maize, children play with clay toys, elders sit in the shade and watch the sky. A wedding is celebrated with music and dance. A child is named in a quiet ritual at dawn. A farmer checks his crops, unaware that the men walking through his village are carrying a future that will change everything. The sun rises and sets as it always has. The wind moves through the trees. The rivers flow. And yet something has shifted. Not in the earth, not in the sky, but in the air. The invisible current of change that moves slower than time, but faster than memory. The runners still carry messages. The priests still burn copal. The stars still guide the night. But now the questions are different. Who are these men? Where are they going? What will they do when they arrive? The path leads higher, into the mountains, where the air is cool and the nights are long. They rest in silence, wrapped in cloaks, listening to the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of leaves, the soft breathing of those beside them. Some pray, some dream. Some stare into the fire, seeing not just flames, but visions of gold, of temples, of glory. Others think of home, of the sea, of the lives they left behind. No one speaks of fear, but it is there, in the way they check their weapons, in the way they post guards, in the way they wake at the slightest sound. They are not conquerors yet. They are travelers, uncertain, vulnerable, dependent on the goodwill of those who know this land far better than they ever will. And still, they are followed not just by allies, but by stories. The tale of the men from the sea spreads faster than their footsteps, carried by runners, by traders, by the wind itself. In Tenochtitlan, the message arrives once more. The Tlatoani listens. The priests consult the codices. The people look toward the east. The dreams grow heavier. A woman wakes in the night, certain she heard thunder from the mountains. A child draws a picture of a man on a beast with fire in his eyes. An elder whispers, "The time of change is here." No one knows what it means, but everyone feels it, like a pressure in the chest, like the moment before rain. The coast is now far behind them, swallowed by distance and memory. The ships are gone, reduced to ash and legend. The sea no longer calls them. There is only the road ahead, winding through forests, across rivers, past ruins older than any living person can remember. They pass temples half buried in vines, stones carved with faces that seem to watch them pass. They do not stop to explore, to wonder, to mourn. They are moving towards something greater, something they cannot yet see. And with every step, the world changes, not with a crash, but with a whisper. Melinson walks in silence, her mind full of languages, of memories, of choices not yet made. She thinks of her mother, of her childhood, of the life that was taken from her. She thinks of the men who now depend on her voice, who look to her when they do not understand. She does not know if she is a traitor or a survivor, a bridge or a weapon. She only knows that she is here, that she is needed, that her words are shaping a future she cannot control. And in that moment, she makes a quiet decision, not to choose a side, but to survive, to witness, to remember. Because history is not only made by those who conquer, but by those who speak, who listen, who carry the truth across the silence. Geronimo watches her, aware of what she carries. He does not speak to her much, but he sees her. He sees the weight in her eyes, the strength in her voice, the way she holds herself between two worlds. He does not envy her. He understands her. They are both outcasts, both survivors, both mediators in a story not of their making. And yet, their presence is essential. Without them, there would be no understanding, no negotiation, no path forward. They are not heroes. They are not villains. They are simply the ones who can hear both sides, and in that hearing, make communication possible. The alliance grows stronger with each passing day. More warriors join. More supplies are provided. The Spaniards begin to trust, not fully, but enough to lower their guards, to share plans, to rely on the knowledge of those who know the land. The people of Tlaxcala, of Totonacapan, do not see themselves as servants. They see themselves as partners in a shared goal. They do not fight for the strangers. They fight for themselves. And in that distinction lies the quiet truth of this conquest. It is not a single force overwhelming another, but a fracture within a world, a moment when the oppressed see an opportunity to break their chains, even if it means inviting a new master. And still the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky, the maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop, and yet the world kept moving in silence. The path into the highlands unfolds like a thread woven through the earth, rising gradually from the humid coast into the cooler, thinner air of the plateau, where the wind carries the scent of pine and dry soil. The ground beneath their feet is no longer soft sand, but packed earth, cracked in places by the sun, scattered with small stones that shift under each step. Dust rises with every movement, clinging to the hems of cloaks, settling in the grooves of leather sandals, coating the skin with a fine, pale film. The Spaniards walk with effort, their bodies still unaccustomed to this terrain, their armor heavy, their breath coming slower in the altitude. They do not speak much. Their silence is not thoughtful, but strained, each man focused on the next step, on the weight of his pack, on the distant shape of the mountains that seem never to grow closer. The air is quiet, broken only by the creak of leather, the clink of metal, the occasional command given in a low voice. Above them, the sky stretches wide and clear, pale blue at the center, deepening to indigo near the edges, where the sun begins its slow descent. Birds circle high above, not in flocks, but alone, their wings outstretched, riding the currents without effort, as if they are the only things in this world that truly belong. Beside them, the people of the land walk with a different rhythm, one that has been shaped by generations of movement across these same trails. Their steps are lighter, their posture more relaxed, their eyes always scanning not just the path ahead, but the trees, the rocks, the shadows between the boulders. They carry supplies in woven nets slung over their shoulders, bundles of maize, dried fish, gourds of water, cloaks for the cold nights. They do not wear armor, but their presence is not passive. They are guides, yes, but also watchers, assessors, participants in a journey they did not begin, but have chosen to join. Their silence is not strained, but deliberate. They speak when necessary, in short phrases, their voices calm, their gestures precise. They do not look at the Spaniards with awe, nor with hatred, but with a quiet calculation, as if measuring the weight of each man, each weapon, each decision. They know this land. They know its dangers, the sudden drop of a ravine, the hidden spring, the ambush point where the path narrows between two cliffs. And they know, too, the political landscape, the alliances, the old wounds, the names of those who have suffered under the rule of Tenochtitlan. The first real encounter with a city comes not with fanfare, but with the gradual appearance of walls, of rooftops, of figures standing on the outskirts, watching. The city is not grand like Tenochtitlan, not built upon water, but nestled into the mountainside, its buildings made of stone and adobe, its streets winding like roots through the terrain. Smoke rises from hearths, curling into the evening air, carrying the scent of roasting corn and herbs. Children pause in their play, their eyes wide, their hands still clutching small clay toys. Women step out of doorways, their hands pausing in the act of grinding maize, their faces unreadable. Men stand with spears in hand, not raised, but ready, their bodies still, their expressions calm. There is no immediate welcome, no celebration, only observation. The Spaniards halt, their hands near their weapons, their eyes scanning for threat. Malintzin moved forward, not with haste, but with the steady pace of someone who knows the power of a voice in stillness. She speaks in Nahuatl, her words measured, introducing the strangers not as conquerors, but as travelers, as men who seek alliance, who carry no ill will toward those who have been burdened by the empire. The silence stretches, long enough to feel the weight of the moment, before an elder steps forward, nods, and invites them in. The meeting takes place in a shaded courtyard, where the ground is swept clean and mats are laid for seating. The air is warm, but not hot, and the sound of a distant flute drifts from another part of the city. Food is brought simple, but abundant. Tortillas, beans, roasted peppers, cups of atole made from maize. The Spaniards eat cautiously, not knowing which gestures are sacred, which foods are forbidden. One man crosses himself before eating. Another refuses the drink offered. These small acts are noticed, not with anger, but with quiet assessment. The leaders of the city speak slowly, their words translated by Malintzin, their questions not about gold or gods, but about intent. What do you seek? Who do you fight? Will you take our sons as tribute? Will you demand our crops? The Spaniards speak of a great king across the sea, of a new god, of justice and liberation. The elders listen, but their eyes do not light with hope. They have heard promises before. They know the cost of alliance, and so they do not commit. They offer shelter, supplies, a guide for the next leg of the journey. But no warriors, not yet. The decision will be made later, in council, in silence, in prayer. Days pass. The travelers rest, recover, mend their clothes, sharpen their tools. The people of the city watch, but also interact. Children grow bolder, approaching the horses, touching their coats, laughing when the animals snort. Women exchange glances with the Spanish women who have come with the expedition, sharing gestures about cooking, about children, about the weight of water jars. A potter shows his work to a Spaniard, who examines the painted designs with genuine interest. These are not moments of diplomacy, but of humanity small, quiet exchanges that do not change history, but make it possible. Meanwhile, messengers arrive from other towns, Totonicapin, Huejotzingo, Tlaxcala, each bringing news, each carrying questions. The story of the men from the sea has spread, not as a myth, but as a possibility. And with it, the first real calculations begin, because this is not just a military campaign. It is a fracture in the old order, a crack through which others might finally escape. In Tlaxcala, the response is different. There, the people have resisted the Mexica for generations. They have never paid tribute. They have fought off every attempt at conquest. Their city is not rich in gold, but in pride, in discipline, in the memory of battles won and lost. When the messengers arrive, the leaders do not hesitate. They gather in the council house, where the walls are painted with scenes of war and sacrifice, where the air still carries the scent of copal from recent rituals. They do not speak of omens or gods. They speak of strategy, of timing, of survival. They study the descriptions. Men covered in metal, weapons that thunder, animals that move faster than runners. They do not believe these men are divine. They believe they are dangerous. And danger, in the right hands, can be turned into power. After days of debate, they make their decision. They will ally. Not out of love for the strangers, but out of necessity. They will provide warriors, supplies, intelligence. They will fight beside them, not for glory, for freedom. When the Spaniards arrive, they are met not with suspicion, but with a solemn welcome. The Tlaxcalteca do not bow. They stand tall. They offer food, yes, but also weapons, maps, knowledge. They show them the roads, the rivers, the weaknesses in the Mexica defenses. They speak openly of their suffering, the sons taken, the crops seized, the humiliations endured. And in their voices, there is no plea for pity, only the quiet strength of those who have waited too long for a chance. The Spaniards listen, some with genuine empathy, others with cold calculation. But all understand, they are not leading this alliance. They are part of it. Without Tlaxcalan warriors, without their knowledge of the land, the journey to Tenochtitlan would be impossible. This is not a conquest by a foreign army. It is a coalition, born of shared resentment, of long-simmering anger, of the hope that one empire's fall might mean another's survival. Malintzin walks among them, her mind full of languages, of silences, of meanings that shift with tone and context. She translates not just words, but intentions. She hears the pride in the Tlaxcalteca voice, the weariness in their stories, the careful hope beneath their offers. She also hears the Spaniards' promises, some sincere, some hollow. She does not judge. She listens. She speaks. She shapes the exchange, not to deceive, but to make understanding possible. And in doing so, she becomes something more than a translator. She becomes a bridge, fragile and essential, standing between two worlds that are beginning to collide. She does not know if she is helping or betraying. She only knows that she is surviving, and that survival has become a kind of power. The alliance grows. More warriors join. More supplies are brought. The path forward becomes clearer, not because the terrain changes, but because the world around them is shifting. News travels faster than footsteps. Runners carry messages between cities, not just of the Spaniards' advance, but of the growing coalition. In Tenochtitlan, the reports arrive one by one. The Tlatoani listens. The priests burn copal. The people murmur in the market. A child draws a picture of a man on a beast with fire in his eyes. An elder says, "The time of change is here." No one knows what it means, but everyone feels it, like a pressure in the chest, like the moment before rain. And still, life continues. In a village far from the road, a woman plants maize in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. The sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. The rivers flow. The stars turn. The earth does not stop because men march across it. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. Even as the future trembles, the present remains. Even as the first stones of an empire begin to loosen, the hands that plant, that weave, that hold children, still move with the same care, the same love, the same quiet determination. The path leads higher, into the mountains, where the air is cool and the nights are long. They rest in silence, wrapped in cloaks, listening to the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of leaves, the soft breathing of those beside them. Some pray, some dream. Some stare into the fire, seeing not just flames, but visions of gold, of temples, of glory. Others think of home, of the sea, of the lives they left behind. No one speaks of fear, but it is there, in the way they check their weapons, in the way they post guards, in the way they wake at the slightest sound. They are not conquerors yet. They are travelers, uncertain, vulnerable, dependent on the goodwill of those who know this land far better than they ever will. And still, they are followed not just by allies, but by stories. The tale of the men from the sea spreads faster than their footsteps, carried by runners, by traders, by the wind itself. It changes with each telling, shaped by hope, by fear, by memory. In some villages, they are seen as gods. In others, as tools. In others, as men like any other, lost and searching. But in all versions, they are part of something larger, something that cannot be stopped, only witnessed. The coast is now far behind them, swallowed by distance and memory. The ships are gone, reduced to ash and legend. The sea no longer calls them. There is only the road ahead, winding through forests, across rivers, past ruins older than any living person can remember. They pass temples half buried in vines, stones carved with faces that seem to watch them pass. They do not stop to explore, to wonder, to mourn. They are moving towards something greater, something they cannot yet see. And with every step, the world changes, not with a crash, but with a whisper. Melinson walks in silence, her mind full of languages, of memories, of choices not yet made. She thinks of her mother, of her childhood, of the life that was taken from her. She thinks of the men who now depend on her voice, who look to her when they do not understand. She does not know if she is a traitor or a survivor, a bridge or a weapon. She only knows that she is here, that she is needed, that her words are shaping a future she cannot control. And in that moment, she makes a quiet decision not to choose a side, but to survive, to witness, to remember. Because history is not only made by those who conquer, but by those who speak, who listen, who carry the truth across the silence. Geronimo watches her, aware of what she carries. He does not speak to her much, but he sees her. He sees the weight in her eyes, the strength in her voice, the way she holds herself between two worlds. He does not envy her. He understands her. They are both outcasts, both survivors, both mediators in a story not of their making. And yet, their presence is essential. Without them, there would be no understanding, no negotiation, no path forward. They are not heroes. They are not villains. They are simply the ones who can hear both sides, and in that hearing, make communication possible. And still, the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinambas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The city of Cholula rises gently from the valley floor, its temples built in layers over centuries, each new stone laid upon the memory of the old, until the great pyramid beneath it becomes the largest by volume in the world, though its slope is so gradual that it looks more like a hill crowned with sanctity than a monument of power. The air here is different, thicker, quieter, as if the weight of so many prayers has settled into the atmosphere. Incense burns constantly in small clay bowls placed at the edges of plazas, its smoke curling upward in slow spirals that twist like serpents before dissolving into the sky. The scent is sweet and earthy, a mixture of copal and dried herbs, carried on a breeze that moves through the courtyards with the hush of a passing thought. The streets are paved with stone, worn smooth by generations of bare feet, and lined with low buildings where families live, cook, and speak in voices that do not rise above the murmur of the wind. This is a city that breathes slowly, that listens more than it speaks, a place where the divine is not distant, but present in the way light falls across a courtyard at midday, in the sound of a flute played at dawn, in the silence between heartbeats during ritual. The Spaniards arrive with their allies, their steps heavy on the stone, their armor clinking with every movement, a sound that feels too sharp, too foreign in this place of soft echoes. They are welcomed, not with celebration, but with careful hospitality. Elders step forward, their faces lined with years, their hands steady as they offer maize, salt, and water, symbols of peace, of shared breath, of mutual recognition. The Tlatelolco walk beside them, their presence a quiet reminder of the shifting alliances, their eyes scanning the rooftops, the temple entrances, the narrow alleys where shadows gather. Melinson translates the greetings, her voice calm, her words measured, choosing phrases that carry respect without surrender. The Cholultecs do not bow, they do not tremble. They stand, they listen, they observe. And in their silence, there is a depth that cannot be rushed. They have lived under the shadow of Tenochtitlan. Yes, but they are not a people broken. They are guardians of one of the most sacred sites in the land, a place where Quetzalcoatl was said to have descended, where pilgrims have come for generations to leave offerings and seek visions. Their hospitality is real, but it is not blind. For days, the travelers rest in the city, their bodies recovering from the long march, their minds adjusting to the quiet rhythm of Cholula. They are given shelter in a large courtyard, where the walls are painted with murals of gods and ancestors, their eyes watching from the stone. The air is cool at night, and the stars are bright, undimmed by smoke or dust. Some of the Spaniards walk through the city in small groups, marveling at the size of the temple, at the order of the streets, at the way life unfolds here without haste. They see women grinding maize, children playing with clay toys, priests lighting incense before small altars. They hear the distant beat of a drum, the high note of a conch shell, the soft chanting of men in prayer. Nothing suggests hostility, nothing suggests danger, and yet something lingers beneath the surface, a tension not in the body, but in the air, like the moment before rain when the wind stops and the birds fall silent. Melinson feels it first. She does not speak of it at first, but she listens more closely, watches more carefully. She notices how certain men avoid the courtyard where the Spaniards sleep, how messages are carried in silence, how the priests burn more copal at night, how the women gather their children earlier than before. She hears whispers in Nahuatl, not meant for her ears, but caught in the stillness. Words like trampa, like sacrificio, like armas escondidas. She does not know if they are true. She does not know if they are fear or rumor or real intent. But she knows that in moments like this, truth and suspicion become the same thing. She tells courts what she has heard, not with alarm, but with caution, shaping her words so they carry weight without panic. He listens, his face unreadable, his mind already turning toward action. He does not ask for proof. He does not wait for confirmation. He makes a decision. The morning begins like any other. The sun rises over the eastern hills, painting the temple walls in soft gold. Smoke rises from 1,000 hearths. A dog barks in the distance. Children laugh as they chase each other through the narrow paths. The market begins to hum, vendors laying out their goods, calling out their prices. The Spaniards gather their men, not in armor, but in readiness. They move quietly, not with stealth, but with purpose. They summon the leaders of Cholula to a meeting in the main courtyard, a gesture of diplomacy, of gratitude, of farewell. The elders come, not in full regalia, but in simple cloaks, their hands empty, their steps calm. They do not suspect. They do not fear. They come as guests, as hosts, as men who have offered peace. And then it happens. The doors are closed. The allies from Tóxcatl move into position. The weapons are drawn. The first scream cuts through the morning air like a crack of lightning. What follows is not a battle. It is a massacre. Men are cut down where they stand. Women who run are blocked. Children scatter like leaves in the wind. Blood spreads across the stone, dark and wet, seeping into the cracks where incense once burned. The Spaniards fight with the fury of men who believe they are saving themselves, their movements sharp, their faces set. The Cholultecs do not have time to arm themselves. They do not have time to flee. They fall one by one, in silence, in confusion, in disbelief. The air fills with the sounds of steel, of shouting, of weeping, of a single flute still playing in a distant courtyard, unaware. When it is over, the plaza is still. The bodies lie where they fell. The incense has gone out. The sun climbs higher, indifferent. No one speaks. The Spaniards do not cheer. They do not pray. They simply look at what they have done, and then they turn away. The Tlatelolco watch, their faces unreadable. They do not mourn, but they do not celebrate. They understand war. They do not understand this. This was not combat. This was not defense. This was something else, something that cannot be undone, something that will be remembered, not in songs, but in silence. Malintzin does not enter the plaza. She stands at the edge, her hands at her sides, her breath slow. She does not cry. She does not turn away. She looks at the bodies, at the blood, at the broken pottery, at the abandoned sandals. She thinks of the woman who offered her a tortilla the day before, of the child who smiled at her horse, of the elder who blessed the water. She does not know if the warning was true. She does not know if the Cholultecs planned to attack. But she knows this. They were not given a chance. And in that knowing, something shifts inside her. She still translates. She still speaks. But now, she listens not just to words, but to what they hide. In the days that follow, the city does not rise in rebellion. It does not send messengers to Tenochtitlan. It does not burn the fields or close the roads. It simply continues, but differently. The fires are smaller. The songs are quieter. The people move through the streets with their eyes lowered, their steps careful. The temple remains open, but fewer enter. The incense burns, but the smoke seems thinner, as if the gods have turned their faces away. No one speaks of what happened, not to the Spaniards, not to their children, not even in whispers. The silence is not empty. It is full of memory, of grief, of a wound that will not bleed, but will never heal. And yet, the world does not stop. A woman still grinds maize in her courtyard. A man still carves a wooden bowl for his grandson. A child still learns to weave reeds into a small mat. The sun still rises. The wind still moves through the trees. The stars still turn above the pyramid. Life continues, not because it forgets, but because it must. Because even in the shadow of violence, even when the heart is heavy, the body still breathes, the hands still work, the earth still gives. But the Spaniards carry the weight of it, not in words, not in confession, but in the way they avoid certain glances, in the way they speak more quietly at night, in the way some of them kneel to pray with more urgency than before. Quartz does not speak of it again. He does not justify. He does not regret. He moves forward, as if the past can be left behind with each step, but it cannot. The memory walks with them, unseen, but real. And the Tlaxcalteca, who joined this alliance for freedom, now see a different truth, that the strangers they walk beside are not just warriors, but men capable of breaking the oldest law, the law of hospitality. The path ahead feels different now, not just because the land changes, but because the trust has thinned. The villages they pass watch them with new eyes. The gifts offered are smaller. The welcomes are shorter. The silence between words grows longer. The story of Cholula travels faster than the army, carried by runners, by traders, by the wind itself. In Tenochtitlan, the message arrives in fragments. The strangers have killed the peaceful. They have broken the sacred. They have turned hospitality into blood. The Tlatoani listens. The priests burn more copal. The people look toward the east. A child draws a picture of a man with a sword standing over a temple. An elder says, "The time of change is here." No one knows what it means, but everyone feels it, like a pressure in the chest, like the moment before a storm. And still, the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The causeway stretches ahead like a path drawn across the surface of a dream, rising from the mainland and cutting straight into the heart of the lake, where Tenochtitlan floats like a vision the earth has chosen to remember. The air is cooler here, thin and crisp with the breath of water, carrying the scent of wet reeds, blooming lily, and the faint, sweet smoke of copal drifting from distant temples. The Spaniards walk in silence, their boots heavy on the packed earth and stone, their eyes wide, their breaths slow, as if they are afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the illusion before them. To their left and right, the lake stretches wide, its surface broken only by the gentle ripple of a passing canoe, a flash of a fish beneath the water, the soft call of a bird hidden among the reeds. Ahead, the city rises from the water as if it had grown there, its temples and palaces painted in vivid reds, blues, and whites, their walls catching the morning light and reflecting it back in a shimmer that makes the entire island seem to glow. The twin pyramids of the Templo Mayor stand at the center, their staircases rising like veins toward the sky, where hawks circle in slow, deliberate circles, their cries echoing across the stillness. This is not a city built on land. It is a city built on water, on willow roots, on human hands, on centuries of labor and devotion. And to see it for the first time is to feel the ground shift beneath your feet, not because of movement, but because of awe. As they move forward, the world around them comes alive in ways they cannot yet understand. Canoes glide silently through the canals, their paddles slicing the water with a soft, rhythmic splash, their occupants pausing to watch the strangers pass. A woman in a red shawl stands on the edge of a chinampa, her hands still in the act of harvesting greens, her eyes following the column of men with quiet curiosity. A child points from a courtyard, then hides behind a doorframe, peeking out with wide eyes. The sounds of the city rise gently, the distant beat of a drum, the high note of a flute, the murmur of voices from a market already humming with life. The air is filled with the scent of roasting maize, of herbs, of wood smoke, of salt from the lake. The light is different here, brighter, clearer, reflected from the water in a way that makes everything seem to shimmer, as if the city is not entirely of this world. The Spaniards do not speak. They cannot. Their minds struggle to name what they see, to fit it into the categories they know: fortress, capital, metropolis, but none of them fit. This is not just a city. It is a living organism, breathing, moving, pulsing with a rhythm that is not their own, and they are not conquerors here, not yet. They are visitors, small and heavy-footed, walking into a world that has already been complete without them. The first true glimpse of the city comes as they near the island, where the causeway meets the mainland of Tenochtitlan in a wide plaza lined with stone columns and low buildings. Here, the air grows thicker with incense, the sound of voices louder, the movement of people more constant. Men and women walk in clean, simple garments of cotton, their hair tied back, their steps measured. Some carry bundles of goods, others clay jars of water, others offerings wrapped in cloth. Children run between the stalls of a small market, laughing, their voices high and clear. A dog trots along the edge of the canal, pausing to drink. The Spaniards are not greeted with fear, not with hostility, not even with excitement, but with a quiet observation, as if the people have already decided what to make of them and are now simply waiting to see what they will do. Melinson walks at the front, her presence calm, her voice ready. She translates the formal greetings, spoken by a noble in a feathered cloak, his words measured, his gestures precise. He offers maize, salt, and water, symbols of peace, of shared breath, of mutual recognition. Quartz accepts them with a nod, his hand on his chest, his face unreadable. There is no embrace, no celebration, no music. Only the slow, deliberate exchange of presence. They are led through the city on a path paved with smooth stone, worn by generations of feet, its surface cool beneath their boots. The streets are wide enough for two men to walk side by side, lined with low walls, flowering plants, and small altars where copal burns in shallow bowls. Homes rise on either side, built of adobe and stone, their courtyards open to the sky, where families can be seen cooking, weaving, speaking in low voices. The air is filled with the sound of grinding maize, the clink of pottery, the soft murmur of conversation. Smoke rises from hearths, curling into the morning air like prayers. The city is not silent, but it is not loud. It hums like a shell held to the ear, carrying the deep, quiet vibration of life lived in rhythm. The Spaniards look up at the temples, at the palaces, at the canals that weave through the city like veins, carrying canoes laden with goods, farmers, priests. They see the chinampas stretching into the lake, green and orderly, their crops growing in straight rows, their surfaces dotted with small huts where families live and work. They do not yet understand the scale of it, the ingenuity, the centuries of knowledge that have gone into shaping this place. They only know that it is real, that it is alive, and that it does not need them to survive. They are taken to a large palace, once used by visiting nobles, now prepared for their stay. The rooms are spacious, their walls painted with murals of gods and ancestors, their floors swept clean, their courtyards shaded by low trees. Mats are laid for sleeping, clay jars of water placed in the corners, bowls of fruit offered on low tables. The hospitality is real, but it is not careless. Guards stand at the entrances, not with weapons drawn, but with watchful eyes. The Mexica do not fear, but they do not trust. They have welcomed the strangers, but they have not opened their hearts. The Spaniards are not guests in the way a friend is a guest. They are guests in the way a storm is welcomed, acknowledged, prepared for, observed. That night, as the sun sets over the lake, painting the water in gold and purple, the city grows quieter. The market closes. The canoes return to their docks. The temples fall silent, but the guards remain. The eyes remain. The silence is not empty. It is full. For days, they live within this quiet tension. They are free to walk, but always with an escort. They are offered food, but never without a watcher nearby. They speak, but their words are translated, measured, sometimes questioned. Malintzin works without rest, her voice the only bridge between two worlds that are beginning to touch, but not yet understand. She translates not just words, but silences, gestures, the space between what is said and what is meant. When a Spaniard laughs too loudly, she softens it in translation. When a Mexica elder bows his head, she explains it is not submission, but respect. She does not take sides. She survives, and in that survival, she becomes essential. The Tlaxcalteca allies move through the city with more ease, but even they are watched. They are not of Tenochtitlan. They are not of the center. They are guests too, though their presence is older, their history deeper. The city does not reject them, but it does not embrace them. It simply holds them, like a hand holding a stone present, but not part of the skin. The market of Tlatelolco is the heart of this world, and when they are finally allowed to enter, it is like stepping into a living ocean. The space is vast, wider than any plaza in Europe, filled with tens of thousands of people moving in a slow, constant tide. Stalls stretch in every direction, overflowing with maize, beans, chilies, cacao, cloth, feathers, pottery, obsidian knives, live animals, herbs, medicines, dyes. The air is thick with smells, smoke, spice, sweat, flowers, the sharp tongue of fermenting cactus fruit. Voices rise and fall in a rhythm that is not chaotic, but ordered, like waves breaking on a shore. Buyers bargain, sellers call out their wares. Children weave between the crowds. Dogs follow their owners. Priests move with quiet dignity. There are no guards with weapons, but there are officials who walk the aisles, watching, listening, ready to settle disputes. Judges sit on low platforms, hearing cases on the spot. Justice here is not hidden. It is visible, immediate, part of the daily rhythm. The Spaniards stand at the edge, overwhelmed, their eyes wide, their minds struggling to comprehend. This is not a market. It is a civilization made visible, a testament to order, abundance, and human connection. And yet, beneath the surface, something shifts. The people do not speak of the strangers in loud voices, but in whispers, in glances, in the way a mother pulls her child closer as they pass. The priests burn more copal at night. The elders gather in silence. The Tlatoani does not appear, but his presence is felt in every decision, every pause, every unspoken rule. The Spaniards are not prisoners, but they are not free. They are being watched. They are being studied. And the longer they stay, the more they understand. This city does not need to fight them. It only needs to wait. Malintzin feels it too. She walks between worlds, but she is not at home in either. The Mexica see her as a traitor or a tool. The Spaniards see her as a servant. The Tlaxcalteca do not trust her. And yet, she is the one who speaks, who listens, who shapes the truth between languages. She does not sleep much. She sits in the courtyard at night, looking at the stars, thinking of her mother, of her childhood, of the life that was taken from her. She does not know if she is helping or betraying. She only knows that she is surviving, and that survival has become a kind of power. She sees the way Quartz looks at the temples, at the gold, at the people. She sees the way his mind turns. And she knows that this peace, this fragile balance, cannot last. Something is coming, not because of war, but because of desire. Because of the hunger that does not speak in words, but in silence. The city continues. A woman still grinds maize in her courtyard. A man still repairs a fishing net. A child still learns to paddle a canoe. The sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. The rivers flow. The stars turn. The earth does not stop because men march across it. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. Even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of change, the lake still reflects the sky, the maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. The palace where they stay becomes a space of careful negotiation, not through formal meetings, but through gestures, through meals shared in silence, through the slow exchange of glances that carry more meaning than words. The Mexica do not rush. They do not demand. They offer, they observe, they wait. The Spaniards, used to command, to movement, to conquest, begin to feel the weight of stillness. They are not in control, they are not leading. They are being allowed to stay, and that permission could be withdrawn at any moment. Quartz speaks of peace, of alliance, of a shared God, but his eyes linger too long on the gold ornaments, on the feathered cloaks, on the steps of the Templo Mayor. The Mexica notice. They do not react. They remember. Days pass, and the rhythm of the city remains unchanged. The canoes glide, the markets hum, the temples echo with ritual. The Spaniards walk the streets, escorted, watched, offered food, but never fully included. They are present, but not part of the fabric. Melinson translates more than words. She translates suspicion, hesitation, the slow turning of trust into doubt. She sees how Quartz interprets silence as weakness, how he mistakes patience for submission. She does not correct him. She cannot. She only speaks what is said, not what is meant. And in that gap, a future begins to take shape, one that she can see, but cannot stop. The air in the city grows heavier, not with storm, but with anticipation. The Spaniards speak in low voices at night, planning, debating, their hands moving over maps drawn in the dust. The Mexica burn more incense, hold longer councils, send runners to distant Tlatelolco. The world moves slowly, but it moves. A child draws a picture of a man on a horse. An elder whispers a story to his grandchildren about a time when the sky turned red. The lake reflects the clouds, the temples, the canoes, the stars. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is lost. It is all held quietly in the memory of the city. And still, the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The first message from the coast arrives not with a shout, but with a silence so deep it seems to swallow the air around it. A runner appears at the gates of the palace in Tenochtitlan, his body bent from days of unbroken travel, his sandals torn, his breath ragged as if he has outrun more than distance. He does not speak to the guards, nor to the gathered Spaniards, but waits to be brought before courts alone, in a chamber where the walls are painted with scenes of war and diplomacy, where the air is thick with the scent of dried herbs and leather. The words he carries are few, but they ripple outward like a stone dropped into still water. Another Spanish force has landed on the Gulf Coast. It is led by Panfilo de Narvaez, sent by the governor of Cuba with orders to arrest Cortes for insubordination, to reclaim the expedition, to bring him back in chains if necessary. The news does not come as a surprise, but as a confirmation. A thread that has been pulling loose for months finally snaps. Cortes stands still, his face unreadable, his hands resting on the edge of a wooden table where a crude map of the region has been drawn in charcoal. He does not call his men. He does not raise his voice. He simply turns and walks to the courtyard, where the others wait beneath the shade of a low tree, its branches heavy with blossoms. There, in a voice so calm it feels colder than anger, he speaks. He tells them what has happened, not as a threat, but as a necessity. They must leave Tenochtitlan. They must go to the coast. They must face their own. The Tlaxcalteca allies listen in silence. Malintzin translates, her voice steady, though her hands remain still at her sides. She does not ask why. She does not question. She knows that when men speak of duty, they often mean survival, and that survival is never about honor, but about timing, about knowing when to turn away from one fire to face another. They leave in the night, not with fanfare, but with secrecy, their movements softened by the darkness, their armor wrapped in cloth to muffle the clink of metal. The city sleeps, unaware of the fracture that has just opened beneath its surface. Canoes glide across the canals, their paddles slicing the water with a soft, rhythmic splash, their occupants pausing to watch the strangers pass. The stars are bright, scattered across the sky like dust on dark velvet. The air is cool, carrying the scent of wet reeds and distant smoke. The Spaniards move quickly, their breath shallow, their eyes scanning the shadows between the buildings. Only a small guard remains in the palace, led by Pedro de Alvarado, a man with sharp eyes and a quiet temper, known more for his discipline than his compassion. Cortes does not look back. He does not hesitate. He knows what he is doing. He is dividing his fate, placing one fire on the coast, another in the heart of the city. He is gambling that he can defeat his enemies before they destroy him, that he can return before the Mexica realize they are no longer held by force, but by illusion. The causeway stretches behind them, disappearing into the mist. The city remains still and quiet, unaware that the balance has shifted, that the fragile peace is now held by a single man and a single decision. And yet, the world keeps moving, in silence. In Tenochtitlan, the days pass with their usual rhythm, as if nothing has changed. The market hums, the canoes glide, the temples echo with the low beat of drums. The remaining Spaniards walk the streets, escorted, watched, offered food, but never fully included. They are present, but not part of the fabric. Alvarado says little. He observes more. He notices how the priests burn more copal at night, how the elders gather in silence, how the people look toward the east as if waiting for something. He does not know about Narvaez. He does not know Cortes is left. But he feels the tension, like the pressure before rain. The festival of Tóxcatl approaches a sacred celebration in honor of Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, the god of night, of destiny, of change. For days, preparations unfold. Dancers practice their steps, their bodies painted in black and red, their headdresses made of quetzal feathers that shimmer in the light. Priests purify the temples, sweeping the stone with brooms of twigs, lighting incense in small clay bowls. Families offer maize and flowers at small altars, their hands moving with ritual precision. The city prepares not for war, but for ritual, for the renewal of the cosmic order. The Mexica do not celebrate lightly. Every gesture has meaning. Every song carries power. And this festival, above all, is one of transformation, of sacrifice, of the delicate balance between life and death. A moment when the veil between the human and the divine is said to be at its thinnest. The morning of the ceremony dawns clear and bright. The lake reflects the sky in perfect stillness. Birds call from the reeds. Smoke rises from 1,000 hearths. The dancers arrive first, their bodies painted in black and red, their headdresses made of quetzal feathers that shimmer in the light. They move in silence, their steps measured, their eyes focused. Behind them come the priests, carrying offerings of flowers, incense, and small animals. Then the nobles, dressed in fine cotton and jade, their faces solemn. The people gather in the great plaza, not in crowds, but in quiet rows, their presence a form of prayer. The air is thick with copal, its sweet, earthy scent curling upward like a bridge to the divine. The drums begin deep, slow, steady, each beat a heartbeat, each pause a breath. The flutes join high and clear, like birdsong. The conch shells sound long and low, calling the gods to witness. This is not a performance. It is an act of faith, a reenactment of the world's creation, a reminder that life must be given to sustain life. The dancers move in perfect unison, their feet striking the stone in a rhythm that seems to echo through the earth. Their headdresses catch the light, scattering colors across the plaza like living rainbows. The priests chant in low voices, their words rising and falling like waves. The sun climbs higher, painting the temple walls in gold. The city breathes in rhythm with the ritual, its heart beating in time with the drums. Alvarado watches from the palace balcony, his hands on the stone railing, his eyes scanning the plaza. He does not understand the language of the ritual. He does not see the meaning in the dancers' steps, in the priests' chants, in the way the people bow their heads in unison. He sees only movement. He sees only numbers. He sees thousands of people gathered, unarmed, focused, vulnerable. And in that moment, he makes a decision. He does not consult the others. He does not seek Melinson. He does not wait. He gives the order. The doors are closed. The soldiers move into position. The weapons are drawn. The first scream cuts through the music like lightning. What follows is not a battle. It is a massacre. Men are cut down where they stand. Dancers fall mid-step, their feathers scattering on the stone. Priests are struck as they raise their hands in prayer. Nobles are dragged from the rows, their jade ornaments ripped away. The plaza, once a space of sacred order, becomes a field of chaos and blood. The Spaniards fight with fury, their movements sharp, their faces set. The Mexica do not resist. They cannot. They are not warriors in this moment. They are worshippers. They fall in silence, in confusion, in disbelief. The drums stop. The flutes fall silent. The conch shells are crushed underfoot. The incense burns out. The sky remains clear. The sun continues its arc. The world does not stop. It only watches. When it is over, the plaza is still. The bodies lie where they fell. The blood spreads in dark pools, seeping into the cracks between the stones. The feathers float on the surface, stained red. No one speaks. The Spaniards do not cheer. They do not pray. They simply look at what they have done, and then they turn away. Alvarado returns to the palace, his boots heavy, his face unreadable. He does not justify. He does not regret. He says only that he acted to prevent a rebellion. But there is no evidence of rebellion. Only prayer. Only ritual. Only the quiet, sacred rhythm of a people honoring their gods. Melinson does not enter the plaza. She stands at the edge, her hands at her sides, her breath slow. She does not cry. She does not turn away. She looks at the bodies, at the blood, at the broken drums, at the abandoned headdresses. She thinks of the dancer who smiled at her the day before, of the priest who blessed the water, of the child who watched the rehearsal with wide eyes. She does not know if Alvarado believed in the threat. She does not know if he feared an uprising. But she knows this. They were not given a chance. And in that knowing, something shifts inside her. She still translates. She still speaks. But now, she listens not just to words, but to what they hide. She begins to understand that language is not only a bridge, but a weapon, that a single phrase, spoken at the wrong moment, can open a door to violence. And yet, she continues, not because she believes in the mission, but because she has learned that survival is not always a choice, but a necessity. The city does not rise in rebellion that day. It does not send warriors. It does not close the markets. It simply continues, but differently. The fires are smaller. The songs are quieter. The people move through the streets with their eyes lowered, their steps careful. The temple remains open, but fewer enter. The incense burns, but the smoke seems thinner, as if the gods have turned their faces away. No one speaks of what happened. Not to the Spaniards, not to their children, not even in whispers. The silence is not empty. It is full of memory, of grief, of a wound that will not bleed, but will never heal. A mother still feeds her child. A man still repairs his roof. A girl still braids her hair. Life goes on, not because it forgets, but because it must. Because even in the shadow of violence, even when the heart is heavy, the body still breathes, the hands still work, the earth still gives. And yet, the weight of the unspoken lingers in every gesture, in every avoided glance, in every meal eaten in silence. The Spaniards carry it too, though they do not name it. Some kneel to pray with more urgency than before. Others drink more, speak less, avoid the edges of the city where the blood was spilled. Alvarado does not speak of it again. He does not justify. He does not regret. He moves forward, as if the past can be left behind with each step, but it cannot. The memory walks with them, unseen but real. And the Mexica, who have lived by order, by ritual, by reciprocity, now know. These men do not play by the same rules. They do not honor the sacred. They do not respect the peace. They break it without warning, without reason, without remorse. When the news reaches the outer districts, it travels not in words, but in silence. Runners carry no messages. Messengers say nothing. But the people know. They see the absence of the dancers. They see the closed temples. They see the way the guards at the palace stand taller, their hands near their weapons. They see the way the women gather their children closer. And they understand. The balance is broken. The fragile peace is gone. The strangers are not guests. They are captors. And the city, once whole, now feels the first tremor of fracture. The days pass in a strange stillness. The market hums, but the voices are lower. The canoes glide, but the paddlers look over their shoulders. The children play, but their laughter is shorter, sharper. The Spaniards walk the streets, but they are no longer watched with curiosity. They are watched with calculation, with memory, with the quiet certainty that something is coming. Not because of war, but because of justice. Because of the need to restore what has been broken. Because even in a world that moves slowly, even in a city that has learned to wait, there are moments when silence can no longer hold. Malintzin sits in the courtyard at night, looking at the stars, thinking of her mother, of her childhood, of the life that was taken from her. She does not sleep much. She hears the whispers in Nahuatl, not meant for her ears, but caught in the stillness. Words like venganza, like libertad, like sangre. She does not translate them. She does not repeat them. She holds them like stones in her pocket. She knows that when Quartz returns, the city will not be the same. She knows that he will not understand what has happened in his absence. She knows that he will see only order, only control, only the surface. But beneath it, the fire has already begun to burn, and still the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world, and even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The night begins not with a storm, but with a stillness so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath. The air in Tenochtitlan is thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth and the faint, lingering smoke of extinguished torches. The canals, usually alive with the soft splash of paddles, are silent. The city sleeps or pretends to, its courtyards dark, its doors closed, its people listening from within. Inside the palace, the Spaniards move with quiet urgency, their armor clinking softly beneath cloaks, their boots pressing into the stone floor as they gather what they can carry. They do not speak much. There is no need. They know what is coming. The Mexica have closed the bridges. The causeways are blocked. The city is no longer a guest house. It is a trap. And so, they must leave. Not in triumph, not in order, but in silence, in darkness, in fear. The rain begins slowly, not as a downpour, but as a mist that clings to the skin, dampens the fabric, blurs the edges of the world. It does not fall from the sky so much as rise from the lake, a cold breath that wraps around the city like a shroud. The Spaniards step onto the causeway, their bodies heavy with armor, their hearts heavier with knowing. They are not escaping. They are being pushed out. The causeway stretches ahead like a narrow path across a dream, its edges lost in the dark water on either side. The rain grows heavier, not in sound, but in weight, soaking through cloaks, dripping from helmets, turning the packed earth into mud that clings to boots with every step. The Spaniards move in a tight column, their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the shadows between the buildings, the rooftops, the dark mouths of alleys. They do not run. They cannot. The weight of their armor slows them. The darkness disorients them. The mud pulls at their feet. Behind them, the city remains silent. No drums, no shouts, no warning. And yet, they feel it, the presence of thousands watching, waiting, holding their breath. A dog barks in the distance. A child cries. A door creaks. These small sounds are louder than any battle cry. They carry meaning. They say, "We see you. We know you are leaving. We are here." The Spaniards do not look back. They keep moving forward, toward the mainland, toward safety, toward survival. But they are not free. They are being herded, not by force, but by the silence of a city that has decided they no longer belong. Then it begins. A conch shell sounds from the darkness, a long note that echoes across the water, sharp and clear. It is not a call to war. It is a signal. And in that moment, the city awakens. From every alley, every rooftop, every canoe hidden in the reeds, men emerge. They do not charge. They do not scream. They simply appear, their bodies dark against the night, their weapons raised. Arrows fly from the darkness, not in waves, but in steady streams, striking with precision. Stones fall from above, crushing helmets, breaking bones. The Spaniards cry out, not in courage, but in pain, in confusion, in disbelief. They try to run, but the mud slows them. They try to fight, but they cannot see their enemies. They are not on a battlefield. They are on a narrow path, surrounded by water, surrounded by silence, surrounded by a people who know this land in ways they never will. The rain masks the blood. The darkness hides the fallen. The lake swallows the dead without sound. A man stumbles, his leg pierced by an arrow, his body collapsing into the mud. Another tries to lift him, but an obsidian-tipped spear strikes his shoulder, and he falls forward, his helmet slipping into the water, where it sinks without a ripple. A third clutches a chest full of gold, his fingers tight around the bars, his eyes wide with the terror of losing what he came for. He does not drop it. He dies holding it, his body dragged into the canal by the weight of his own greed. The Mexica do not loot. They do not celebrate. They move with purpose, cutting the bridges behind the retreating column, sealing off escape, ensuring that no one who leaves will do so unmarked. Canoes glide through the water, their paddles silent, their warriors standing tall, launching arrows with calm precision. The Spaniards are not warriors now. They are prey, and the city, which once welcomed them, now expels them with the quiet force of a body rejecting a sickness. Malintzin walks among them, her body wrapped in a cloak, her face hidden. She does not carry a weapon. She does not run. She moves slowly, carefully, her eyes scanning the darkness, her ears listening to every sound. She does not weep. She does not pray. She simply walks, her mind full of images. The woman who offered her a tortilla, the child who laughed at her horse, the priest who blessed the water. She thinks of the words she translated, the meaning she shaped, the trust she carried between two worlds. And now she is leaving, not as a bridge, but as a survivor. She does not know if she is escaping or being cast out. She only knows that she is still breathing, still moving, still carrying the weight of what has happened. A stone strikes her shoulder. She does not cry out. She keeps walking. Her presence is no longer needed. And yet she remains. The night is long. The rain does not stop. The cold seeps into bones, into armor, into the spaces between breaths. Men fall and do not rise. Some drown in the canals, their heavy armor pulling them down before they can scream. Others are dragged away by hands that rise from the shadows. The column grows thinner, weaker, more desperate. They are not a conquering force. They are a broken remnant, fleeing through mud and water, through darkness and rain, through the silence of a city that has reclaimed itself. The causeway is no longer a path. It is a corridor of loss, where every step is paid for in blood, in memory, in the quiet understanding that they were never meant to stay. When they finally reach the mainland, the survivors collapse. They do not cheer. They do not embrace. They simply fall to their knees, their bodies trembling, their breath ragged. Some vomit, others weep. A few crawl to the edge of the water and drink, their hands shaking. The rain continues, washing the mud from their faces, mixing with tears, with blood. The city behind them is silent once more. The bridges are cut. The causeways are blocked. The Mexica have not pursued them. They have not needed to. The lake has done its work. The night has done its work. The city stands, whole, breathing, alive. And the Spaniards, what remains of them, sit in the mud, in the cold, in the dark, looking back at the island that has expelled them. Among the survivors, a man counts the dead. He does not speak their names. He does not mark their graves. He simply knows they are gone. Friends who shared bread, who guarded the same watch, who dreamed of gold and glory. Now they are water, mud, silence. Another holds a single object, a small clay figurine of a jaguar, taken from a temple, now cracked, stained with rain. He does not throw it away. He does not keep it. He places it gently on the ground as if returning it. A woman Malincine sits apart, her back against a tree, her eyes open, watching the sky. She does not sleep. She listens to the rain, to the distant call of a bird, to the soft breathing of the survivors. She does not think of the future. She thinks of the present, of the weight of her body, of the cold, of the fact that she is still alive. The dawn comes slowly, not with light, but with a softening of the dark. The rain eases. The clouds part, revealing a pale sky streaked with gray and rose. The survivors rise, not because they are ready, but because the body must move. They gather what little they have: broken weapons, torn cloaks, scraps of food. They do not look back at the city. They do not curse it. They simply begin to walk toward Tóxcatl, toward safety, toward a future they can no longer imagine. Their steps are slow, unsteady, marked by exhaustion and grief, but they move. And in that movement, there is a kind of return not to glory, but to life. Malincine walks with them, her presence quiet, her voice unused. She does not translate. There is no one to speak to. The Tlatelolco allies walk beside them, their faces unreadable. They do not mock. They do not comfort. They simply walk, as if they have always known this would happen, as if they have seen empires rise and fall, as if they understand that power is not in gold, but in land, in memory, in the ability to wait. The path ahead is long. The air is cool. The birds begin to sing. The world, vast and slow, continues its turning. And yet, the weight of the night lingers, not in words, but in silence, not in anger, but in memory. The Spaniards do not speak of what happened. They do not name the dead. They do not blame Alvarado, nor Quartz, nor the Mexica. They simply carry it, like a stone in the chest, like a scar beneath the skin. And the Mexica, who have defended their city, do not celebrate. They rebuild the bridges. They clean the plazas. They return to their homes. A woman grinds maize. A man carves a mask. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it forgets, but because it must. The rain has washed the blood from the stone. The lake has taken the bodies. The wind carries no sound of mourning. And yet the world keeps moving in silence. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. In the days that follow, the survivors do not speak of victory or defeat. They speak of cold, of hunger, of the weight of armor and water, of the sound of a friend's voice cut short. They do not tell stories. They carry them. And in their silence, the truth of what happened on that night is preserved more completely than any chronicle could hold. Malincine walks among them, her presence no longer a bridge, but a witness. She does not look toward the city. She does not look toward the future. She looks at the ground, at the mud, at the footprints left behind. She knows that she is still alive, and that is enough. For now. The path to Tlaxcala is long, but it is not walked in silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of recovery. Men help each other. They share water. They carry the weak. They do not speak much, but when they do, it is with care. A hand on a shoulder, a shared glance, a name spoken softly. These small acts are not heroic. They are human, and in them The possibility of return begins to take shape, not as conquest, but as survival. The Tlatelolco receive them without celebration, but with food, with shelter, with dry cloaks. They do not ask many questions. They already know. The story of La Noche Triste travels faster than the survivors themselves, carried by runners, by traders, by the wind. And still, the world moves. The sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And still, the world moves. The canals of Tenochtitlan reflect the sky once more. The market hums. The temples echo with prayer. The children play. The elders watch. The city breathes. It remembers. It lives. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The lake that once welcomed canoes now holds its breath. The water, which for centuries carried food, traders, and news between the city and the mainland, has become a boundary, a barrier, a prison. From the shores, the Spaniards and their allies watch, their eyes scanning the causeways, the floating gardens, the rooftops of Tenochtitlan. Now half hidden in the morning mist, they do not march. They do not shout. They wait. And in that waiting, they build. Wood is hauled from the forests, cut and shaped into long, flat-bottomed boats called brigantinas, small ships with sails and oars, designed to move across the shallow waters of the lake. The sound of hammers rises each day, sharp and steady, echoing across the valley like a heartbeat that does not belong. The Mexica hear it from the city, a rhythm foreign to their world, a pulse that speaks not of life, but of tightening. They stand on the edges of the causeways, watching the construction, their faces unreadable. They do not panic. They do not flee. They return to their homes, to their families, to their hearths, and they prepare. The lake still reflects the sky. The canoes still glide. The maize still grows in the chinampas. But the air has changed. It is thinner, heavier, filled with the scent of sawdust and salt, of fear and resolve. The brigantinas are launched at dawn, their wooden hulls sliding into the water with a soft, final sound. They are not large, but they are many 12 in total, each carrying soldiers, weapons, and a quiet confidence. They move slowly at first, their sails catching the morning wind, their oars dipping into the water with a rhythm that is not natural, but imposed. From the city, the Mexica watch in silence. They do not fire arrows. They do not shout. They wait. And when the boats come closer, they act. The bridges that connect the causeways are lifted, their wooden beams pulled into the city with ropes and strength. The Spaniards are forced to stop, their path cut, their advance halted, but they do not retreat. They anchor, they wait, they plan. And each night, under the cover of darkness, the Mexica rebuild the bridges, laying the beams back into place, securing them with ropes and stones. Each morning, the Spaniards return, cut them again, and push forward. This is not a battle of thunder and fire. It is a battle of patience, of repetition, of a slow, relentless pressure. The lake becomes a chessboard, and the city, though surrounded, refuses to be still. Hunger arrives quietly, not with a scream, but with a thinning of the body, a slowing of the hands, a quietness in the voice. The markets, once overflowing with maize, beans, chilies, and cacao, begin to empty. The traders from the mainland no longer come. The canoes that once carried food from the chinampas are fewer, their loads smaller. A mother grinds less maize each morning. A child asks for more, but receives only silence. The elders gather in the courtyards, their faces lined with thought, their hands resting on their knees. They do not speak of surrender. They speak of endurance. They remember droughts. They remember famines. They remember how the world has turned before. They know that hunger is not just in the belly, but in the mind, in the way it makes men desperate, makes them forget who they are. And so, they ration. They share. They feed the children first. They do not complain. They do not weep. They simply carry the weight, like a stone in the chest, like a debt owed to the future. And then the sickness comes. It arrives not with warning, but with a cough. A man wakes in the night, his body hot, his breath shallow. He does not know what it is. He thinks it is fatigue, is hunger, is the cold, but by morning he cannot rise. His skin is red, his eyes glassy, his body covered in sores. His family gathers around him, burning copal, calling the name of Tlatelolco, offering prayers. But nothing helps. The cough spreads. The fever climbs. The sores grow. And then another falls, and another, and another. The priests burn more incense. The elders consult the codices. The healers mix herbs, bathe the sick, whisper ancient words. But this is not a disease they know. It moves faster than any illness before. It does not care who is noble, who is warrior, who is child. It strikes without reason, without mercy. Smallpox, though they do not name it, sweeps through the city like a shadow, moving from house to house, from alley to alley, from heart to heart. The temples grow quiet. The drums stop. The market hums with fewer voices. The canoes glide with fewer hands. And still, the brigantinas circle, their sails catching the wind, their oars cutting the water, their presence a constant reminder that the world outside is closing in. A woman sits by her son's bed, her hand on his forehead, her breath slow. He is burning with fever, his body weak, his eyes half open. She sings to him, a lullaby her mother once sang, her voice soft, steady, full of a love that cannot cure, but can comfort. She does not cry. She does not pray aloud. She simply stays. When he dies, she wraps him in a cotton cloth, carries him to the edge of the canal, and places him gently in a canoe. A neighbor rows it to the mainland, where the earth is still soft enough to dig. No ceremony, no music, no gathering, just silence. And yet, the grief is not small. It is deep, quiet, carried in the way she moves the next morning, in the way she grinds less maize, in the way she looks at the other children, as if memorizing their faces. The city resists, not with grand armies, but with small acts. Men rebuild the bridges at night, their hands bleeding from the ropes, their bodies weak from hunger. Women weave nets to trap fish in the canals. Children gather reeds to patch roofs. The warriors stand on the edges of the causeways, their spears ready, their eyes sharp. They do not charge. They wait. They fight when the Spaniards come close, launching arrows, dropping stones, pulling men into the water. But each day there are fewer of them. Some fall to the disease, others to hunger, others to exhaustion. And still they stand, not because they believe they will win, but because they believe they must. Because to stop is to let the city die not just in body, but in spirit. Malintzin walks among the Spaniards now, her presence no longer that of a bridge, but of a witness. She does not celebrate their progress. She does not speak of glory. She watches the city from a distance, her eyes scanning the rooftops, the canals, the temples. She thinks of the woman who offered her a tortil, of the child who laughed at her horse, of the priest who blessed the water. She does not know if they are alive. She does not ask. She carries the silence like a weight. Court speaks of victory, of gold, of God. She says nothing. She translates, but her voice is softer now, as if speaking too loudly might break something fragile. She knows that what is happening is not conquest. It is collapse. And collapse does not belong to one side. It belongs to the world. The Brigantinas move closer each day. They cut more bridges. They block more canals. They patrol the waters, preventing any canoe from leaving or entering. The city is not just surrounded. It is suffocating. A man tries to escape in a small canoe, hoping to reach the mainland, to find food, to survive. An arrow strikes his back. He falls into the water, his body carried away by the current. Another attempts to swim, but the cold takes him. His hands reach the shore, but his body does not follow. The lake, once a source of life, now takes it back, and still the sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. The stars turn above the pyramids. The earth does not stop because men suffer. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. In the palace, the Tlatoani sits in silence. He does not give orders. He does not weep. He listens to the reports of hunger, of disease, of fallen warriors, and he nods. He knows what is coming. He has seen the empty markets. He has heard the coughs in the night. He has felt the weakening of his own body. He does not speak of surrender. He speaks of dignity, of honor, of the city that was, and the city that will be remembered. When the final assault comes, he does not flee. He stands. And when the Spaniards enter, he does not raise his weapon. He lowers his head, not in defeat, in acceptance. The city is taken. The temples are torn down. The stones are repurposed. The flags change, but life does not end. Families still wake at dawn. Women still grind maize. Children still laugh. The disease does not stop with the city. It spreads to the Allies, to the Spaniards, to the mainland. Men who thought they were conquerors fall to the same cough, the same fever, the same sores. They do not understand. They call it punishment. They call it fate. They do not see that the world does not choose sides. It simply moves. And in its movement, it carries both life and death, both creation and ruin, both memory and silence. And yet, the world moves. The sun rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. The lake still reflects the sky. The canals still carry water. The chinampas still float, green and quiet, like islands of memory. The market, though changed, still hums. The people speak a new language, wear new clothes, pray to new gods. But their blood, their memory, their hands, they remain. Melinsen's name is still spoken, sometimes as traitor, sometimes as survivor, always as a woman caught between two worlds. And the stories, though altered, still hold the shape of what was. The city is not gone. It is transformed. And in that transformation, the past does not disappear. It settles like silt at the bottom of a lake, waiting to be stirred by time, by memory, by a single question whispered in the dark. And still, the world moves. The canals of Tenochtitlan reflect the sky once more. The market hums. The temples echo with prayer. The children play. The elders watch. The city breathes. It remembers. It lives. And still, the world moves. A woman still grinds maize in her courtyard. A man still repairs a fishing net. A child still learns to paddle a canoe. The sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. The rivers flow. The stars turn. The earth does not stop because men march across it. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And still the world moves. The Spaniards walk the streets of the new city, their boots heavy on the stone, their eyes scanning the rooftops. The Tlaxcalteca allies stand beside them, their presence a quiet reminder of the shifting alliances. The Mexica do not resist. They do not flee. They simply continue. They cook, they weave, they sing, they live. Not because they have forgotten, but because they must. And still the world moves. The smoke rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. The lake still reflects the sky, the maize still grows in the chinampas, and the sun still rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. The city does not vanish. It changes. The great temples of Tenochtitlan, once crowned with red and blue paint, their staircases worn smooth by generations of bare feet, are dismantled stone by stone. The shrines of Huitzilopochtli and Tlatelolco are torn down, their carved faces buried beneath rubble, their altars broken, their sanctity erased not by fire, but by replacement. On the same sacred ground, new stones are laid pale, unadorned, shaped into walls and arches that rise in straight lines, not toward the sky, but toward a different kind of order. The Spaniards build a church where the Templo Mayor once stood, its bell ringing each morning with a sound that cuts through the air like a command. The Mexica hear it. They do not stop. They continue. They walk past it, their feet pressing into the same earth, their hands still shaping maize into tortillas, their voices still calling out in the market. The city is not gone. It is layered. The new rests upon the old, like a garment worn over a scar, covering it, but never erasing it. The streets are renamed, but the paths remain. The canals still carry water, still reflect the sky, still guide the canoes that glide through the morning mist. The chinampas float, green and quiet, their crops growing in straight rows, tended by the same hands that have worked them for generations. The Spaniards walk the causeways with confidence, their boots heavy on the stone, their eyes scanning the rooftops, their minds filled with the idea of conquest. But the people do not vanish. They cook, they weave, they sing, they live. Not because they have forgotten, but because life does not stop. A mother still feeds her child. A man still repairs his fishing net. A girl still braids her hair. The world moves, not in defiance, but in rhythm. And the city, though changed, still breathes. The Tlaxcalteca, who fought beside the Spaniards, are rewarded. They are given land. They are granted privileges. Their leaders are recognized. But the victory does not bring peace. It brings a new weight. They are not conquerors. They are allies. And allies, once used, are often forgotten. Their children grow up speaking a new language, wearing new clothes, but their elders still gather in the courtyard at dusk, their voices low, telling stories of the war, of the night of rain, of the city that once stood whole. They do not speak of glory. They speak of survival, of choices made in silence, of the cost of freedom. And they look toward Tenochtitlan, now called Mexico City, and they wonder, did we break the chains, or did we only exchange them? Malintzin does not live to see the full transformation. Her presence fades from the chronicles, mentioned only in passing, her voice no longer needed. but her name lingers. In some villages, she is spoken of as a traitor, a woman who gave her people to strangers. In others, she is remembered as a survivor, a bridge who walked between fires and did not burn. Her face is not carved in stone, but it lives in the memory of those who know that translation is not just of words, but of worlds. And though she is gone, her voice echoes in every child who grows up speaking two languages, in every story told in two ways, in every silence that holds more than one truth. The disease does not leave with the war. It remains. It moves through the land, not in armies, but in breath, in touch, in the quiet spread of coughs in the night. Entire villages disappear. Elders fall. Children die before they learn to walk. The priests burn copal, call the names of the gods, offer prayers, but the sickness does not listen. It does not care. It is not a god. It is not a man. It is not even a choice. It is a force that moves through the world without meaning, without memory, without mercy. And yet, life continues. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe, not because they are unaware, but because they must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. New gods are brought. New prayers are taught. The cross rises above the temples. The Mass is said in Latin, a language no one understands, but spoken with conviction. And yet, in the homes, in the courtyards, in the quiet corners of the city, the old words are still whispered. A mother hums a lullaby to her child, not in Spanish, but in Nahuatl. A man lights a small flame before a stone, not as worship, but as memory. A woman grinds maize and says a quiet word to Tlatelolco, asking for rain. These are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of continuity. The gods do not vanish. They change shape. They become part of the everyday, hidden in the way bread is broken, in the way water is poured, in the way hands are folded before sleep. The language does not die. It changes. It bends. It blends. Words from Nahuatl slip into Spanish chocolate, to mate, aguacate carrying with them the taste of a world that was. Children grow up speaking a new tongue, but their laughter has the same rhythm, their anger the same pitch, their love the same silence. The codices are burned, but the stories are not. They are passed from elder to child, from mother to daughter, from one generation to the next, not in books, but in voice, in gesture, in the way a hand moves when shaping clay. The past is not written. It is lived. And the city grows. New buildings rise. New streets are paved. The lake is drained, bit by bit, its waters redirected, its surface shrinking, the canals narrow, the chinampas dry. The birds fly elsewhere. But still, in the quiet mornings, when the mist rises from what remains of the water, when the first light touches the surface, when a single canoe glides across the stillness, the city remembers. It remembers the sound of paddles, the smell of roasting maize, the laughter of children, the beat of drums, the smoke of copal. It remembers not as memory, but as presence. Because some things do not need to be named to be felt. A woman walks through the market, her hands full of chilies, her shawl wrapped tight against the morning chill. She does not look at the church. She does not think of the Spaniards. She thinks of her son, of the meal she will prepare, of the way the sun is rising over the mountains. A man repairs a fishing net by the edge of the canal, his hands moving with the rhythm of years. A child runs through the plaza, chasing a ball made of rags, his laughter sharp and clear. The bell rings. The city breathes. Life continues. Not because it forgets, but because it must. The smoke still rises from the hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. The lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the sun still rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. The city is not gone. It is transformed. And in that transformation, the past does not disappear. It settles like silt at the bottom of a lake, waiting to be stirred by time, by memory, by a single question whispered in the dark. A child draws a picture of a man on a horse. An elder tells a story of the great temple that once stood where the church now is. A woman sings a lullaby in a language her daughter does not understand. These are not acts of resistance. They are acts of continuity. The world moves not by forgetting, but by carrying. And still the world moves. The canals of Tenochtitlan reflect the sky once more. The market hums. The temples echo with prayer. The children play. The elders watch. The city breathes. It remembers. It lives. And still the world moves. A woman still grinds maize in her courtyard. A man still repairs a fishing net. A child still learns to paddle a canoe. The sun rises. The wind moves through the trees. The rivers flow. The stars turn. The earth does not stop because men march across it. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And still the world moves. The Spaniards walk the streets of the new city, their boots heavy on the stone, their eyes scanning the rooftops. The Tlatelolco allies stand beside them, their presence a quiet reminder of the shifting alliances. The Mexica do not resist. They do not flee. They simply continue. They cook, they weave, they sing, they live. Not because they have forgotten, but because they must. And still the world moves. The smoke rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. The lake still reflects the sky, the maize still grows in the chinampas, and the sun still rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world. And still the world moves. The market of Tlatelolco still hums. Though the stalls are different, the voices speak a new tongue. The goods are no longer feathers and jade, but cloth and iron. But the rhythm is the same. The buyers bargain. The sellers call out. The children weave between the legs. The elders sit on low stools, watching. The city breathes. It does not stop. It adapts. It endures. And still the world moves. The lake, though smaller, still holds the reflection of the sky. The canoes still glide. The farmers still tend the chinampas. The women still grind maize. The men still fish. The children still laugh. The bells ring. The prayers rise. The stars turn. The heart beats. The earth turns. The sun rises. The wind moves. The world, vast and slow, continues its turning, indifferent to the names of empires, to the rise and fall of kings, to the dreams of conquerors. It simply moves. And still the world moves. The stories are not gone. They are changed. They are told in new ways, in new languages, with new names, but they carry the same weight, the same sorrow, the same love. A mother still sings to her child. A father still teaches his son to fish. A grandmother still tells the old stories, even if no one fully understands. These are not ruins. They are roots. And still the world moves. The smoke rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. The lake still reflects the sky, the maize still grows in the chinampas, and the sun still rises over the mountains. The rivers flow to the sea. A woman plants seeds in the soil. A man carves a mask for a ceremony. A child learns to paddle a canoe. Life continues, not because it is unaware, but because it must. Because even when the future trembles, the present remains. The earth does not stop turning because men march across it. The stars do not vanish because new ones appear on the horizon. The heart beats, not in defiance, but in rhythm with the world, and even as the footsteps grow louder, even as the wind carries whispers of war and change, the lake still reflects the sky. The maize still grows in the chinampas, and the smoke still rises from 1,000 hearths, curling into the air like prayers that never stop. And yet, the world kept moving in silence. And so, we come to the end of this journey, not with a conclusion, but with a quiet pause, like the moment after rain, when the world is still wet, still listening. You've walked through the canals of Tenochtitlan at dawn, felt the weight of the lake beneath your feet, heard the soft splash of paddles, smelled the warmth of tortillas on hot stone. You've stood in the marketplace of Tlatelolco, where tens of thousands moved like a living tide, trading cacao, feathers, dreams. You felt the tension in the air when strangers arrived from the sea, seen how trust was given, how it was broken, how silence grew heavier than war. You've walked the causeways at night, through mud and rain, carrying loss like a stone in the chest. And you've seen how, even when a city falls, life does not stop. A woman still grinds maize. A man still repairs a fishing net. A child still learns to paddle a canoe. The world, vast and slow, continues its turning, not because it forgets, but because it must. Thank you for walking with me through this story, not as a chronicle of conquest, but as a quiet remembrance of lives lived, of choices made in silence, of a world that once shone like a jewel upon the water. This is not a tale of heroes or villains. It is a story of feet on stone, of hands shaping clay, of voices whispering in the dark. It is a story of what remains, not in monuments, but in the taste of chocolate, in the rhythm of a drum, in the way a mother sings to her child, in a language older than memory. History is not only in books. It lives in the breath of those who came before us, still whispering in the wind. Now, let your body sink deeper into rest. Let your breath slow, as if you are lying on a chinampa at dusk, the water still around you, the sky turning soft with twilight. Let your thoughts soften, like ripples fading on the surface of a lake. There is no need to hold on to anything, no need to remember every detail. Just let the story settle, like silt at the bottom of a deep pool, where it can rest, where it can be stirred again another night. If you'd like, imagine standing by the edge of the lake at dawn. The air is cool. The first light touches the surface, turning it gold and rose. A single canoe glides by, silent, carrying a fisherman with his net. Somewhere, a child laughs. That sound, that moment, that is what endures. Not the thunder of war, not the weight of empires, but the quiet persistence of life, moving forward, one breath at a time. And if this story touched you, if a single detail made you pause or wonder, or remember, perhaps the scent of copal, the image of a floating garden, the weight of a word spoken in translation, then thank you. You've already given it life, and if you feel like it, leave a comment, just a word, a feeling, a thought. Where in time or space are you listening from? What part of the story stayed with you? Every time someone shares, the story breathes a little longer, just as it has for centuries. Now let go. Let yourself drift into dreams. There will be more stories tomorrow, more cities, more lives, more quiet moments waiting to be remembered. The past walks with you, not as a burden, but as a companion. Sleep well. You are not alone. And yet, the world kept moving in silence.